Now let's take a look at a couple of real simple examples. The first one's going to be a simple transaction example. Then we'll do a locking example. So what I want to do here is let's start off with an update statement that we don't want to run. Okay, so I'll do update. We're going to update the person.person table. Person is the schema, person is the table. And we're just going to say set last name equal to long. Now, you know what's going to happen, and I know what's going to happen. If I execute that, it's going to change every last name in that table, right? Well, that's fine. I'm going to do that. But first, I'm going to do an explicit transaction. I can spell out transaction, but I'll just do begin tran, and I'll name the transaction ML. Okay, so now I'm going to highlight all of that and execute it. And if you'll notice down here, my query just keeps executing and executing and executing. And what's the problem? And you're going to notice right down here in just a moment when this thing gets done, I have made a horrible mistake with my database. I have just changed the last name on every row in that database. And it took us almost 20 seconds, took us 19 seconds to get there. And I just changed the last name. So notice, let's go look at our, forget my changed cases there on person. But notice, every last name is now long. Well, that's not good. That's not good at all. So what can I do? Well, I had begun a transaction up there. So let's just do this. Let's roll back tran ML. So I will highlight that. I will execute it. And it'll take it just a moment here. But notice the command completed successfully. I'll go back, do another select from that database. And notice, like magic, all my last names are back. So what that did is it wrote all of those into the transaction log when I did it. And I began a transaction, and all of those lines were marked in that transaction log as an open transaction. And then when I went back and did a rollback, it said, oh, he don't want to do this. It just deleted them out of the transaction log, and everybody's happy. Okay, so that's kind of a poor man's undo, if you will. It's a programmatic way in Transact SQL of using transactions to get an undo functionality. And that is exactly what we want to do. Had I decided I wanted to keep that, I would have typed commit tran ML and run that. And so what you're normally going to do in code, check for an error, check for any kind of condition like that, whatever you want to check for. And then based on the results of that check, either commit it or roll it back. So that's a quick look at an explicit transaction because we explicitly said begin the transaction, then we explicitly said roll the transaction back. Now let's look at a locking example. And with this one, now this is a little confusing, so stay with me here. And I tried to write this up in the code that's out there in the working files folder. You'll have to follow the instructions very closely. I'm going to begin a tran called MTL here, and I'm going to update person, and I'm going to set the first name equal to Jack, where the first name is equal to Terry, and the last name is equal to Duffy. Now, if we do a quick select from person.person, you're going to notice that we have a Terry Duffy out here. Notice here's Terry, and here's Duffy for the last name. Okay? Now, I want you to notice something. I have begun a transaction right here. All right? So I will click to execute this. And notice it says the query executed successfully, but I've begun a transaction that I've not closed. So I'm going to go up here to the new query button and click it. And I've just opened another tab. There's my old tab. There's my new one. This is a new connection into the database. Okay. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and say, select everything from person.person. And I'm going to say where the business entity ID is equal to 2. Now, it just so happens that Terry Duffy's business entity ID is 2. All right, notice if I select this and look at her right here, notice it's been changed. It's 2. I could see it because I'm the person doing it, okay? I'm going to come right here and I'll execute this query. And I want you to notice this simple little select just keep executing and executing and executing. Now what's happening? This update statement right now with the begin transaction, this begin tran MTL right now has grabbed this particular row where Terry equals Duffy. It's changed it to Jack, but since I haven't committed it or rolled it back, it's going to lock everybody else out from looking. So if you're the poor soul who's trying to get this information, it's just sitting there and it looks like the system's slow and nothing's going well. And it's going to stay this way until somebody either rolls that transaction back or commits it. Okay. So I'm going to commit tran MTL, right? So I'll highlight that, execute it. Notice it completed. And if I go back to my other window, the select has automatically run now. The select ran the instant I committed this transaction. And notice if I select from person.person now, it is Jack Duffy, just like it had changed before it was committed. So that is how you can see how one transaction that's open that hasn't been committed to roll back will block other people and will apply those locks, and people will just have to sit and wait. So you want to be very, very careful and very, very prudent that you open a transaction, get your business done, and close it, because you could be slowing other people down who are trying to work in the database as well.